Thank you very much, Anne. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, stories have been at the heart of human behavior since the beginning of time. And today I'm going to tell you more about why we need to win the battle of narratives and of storytelling. Storytellers have always been at the center of the community. They've always had a central role, with both immense powers and immense responsibility. Immense powers because they shape our desire, they shape our dreams, they shape the way we project ourselves in the future, and at the end of the day, they shape our societies. You shape our societies. Immense responsibility to adapt to the ecological transition, as Anne just said, but also to depict a more viable or more livable and a more desirable future. The problem is that currently there are also lots of narratives that depict less viable futures. And as the most observant ones in this public may have noticed, I'm going to welcome a tiny human on this planet quite soon. And I'd love to see more fictions, or at least one fiction, one show, one movie that depicts a world and a future where I want my children to live in. And that's exactly what we do at Imagine 2050. We connect storytellers, writers, producers, cultural companies and institutions with the scientific world to help them better understand the urgency of the situation and identify their role. So we do lots of conferences, workshops, editorial support in order to bring out more fiction showing a desirable future. And we always start reminding a few key elements about the state of the planet. So you will also have these elements. It's important today, it's about shaping the future, so it's also about reminding each other what's at stake. And I'm going to start with a map. So it won't be the weather forecast. It's a map showing Europe 20,000 years ago. So here, during the last ice age, you see that we had an immense ice cap, which was at some point 3 kilometers thick, going down south to London in northern Germany. And you could actually walk from Lille to London because the ocean were 120 meters lower. So this was Europe 20,000 years ago. And the global average temperature at that time, during the last ice age, was only 5 degrees below the average temperature today. So this is Europe with 5 degrees on average, and 5 degrees of reduction on average compared to what we have today. So we have increased the global temperature by 5 degrees in 20,000 years. And today, the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, so a group of thousands of scientists from all over the world, tell us that we are on a path to have an increase of about 3.2 degrees by the end of the century. So this was Europe with 5 degrees of reduction, and it evolved over 20,000 years. By the end of the century, so in about 100 years, we can have an increase of 3.2 degrees. Even more if we really don't do anything. Do you think that we as human beings, that plants, birds, animals, insects, will have time to adapt to this? Let's probably not hope so. So, climate change is also only one of 9 planetary boundaries. You also have biosphere integrity, so biodiversity loss, chemical pollutions, and according to scientists, 5 out of 9 planetary boundaries have already been exceeded. And to make things even more complex, we also need, so here outside you see the planetary boundaries, but we also need to ensure that human beings have access to healthcare, education, and all the elements that make a dignified and fulfilling life. And this is what is called the donut model, the donut economy. So it's this thin space between the planetary boundaries and dignified lives for human beings. And what we need today, what we really need urgently, are elements, fictions, stories, and also technologies to help us be in this donut and reach this donut. As the climatologist Robert Votard says it, we only have a few years to avoid the unmanageable, so the existing effect of climate change, but also to manage the unavoidable. That's why we are talking about a battle of narratives, because today, as you probably know, most fictions depict paths that take us way beyond 3.2 degrees. 53 years ago in the US, so on April 22nd, 1970, 20 million American citizens took the street and demonstrated against pollution, oil spills, and environmental catastrophes. So back then, there was already a battle of narratives. But then came Reagan and then George W. Bush father, who said that the American way of life was not negotiable, and lots of movies showing people driving huge cars and flying all around and dominating nature, and not much was done for the planet. 53 years later, today, can we afford to lose another battle of narratives, or even to lose a few years? I don't think so. And at Imagine 2050, we synthesized a few forecast prospective works, including from the SHIFT project, an organization for which I work, and we highlighted a few narratives that are today very powerful. One is the business as usual, so it's a narrative of limitless consumption, and also a narrative of denial, because it denies the planetary boundaries and the limits where we win. The technological fix, embodied by Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, that acknowledges the environmental limits, but also promotes the idea that technology will help us preserve our comfort while addressing these issues. But at the end of the day, it's mostly bunkers for the wealthiest, and all the technologies rely on resources and energy and land that is currently not available if we want to remain in the donut. And the last one is the sufficiency narrative, and it's the viable, the most viable, livable, pragmatic future, and also, I believe, the most desirable ones. And storytellers, you as storytellers, as producers, as scriptwriters, you have huge, immense powers, superpowers to help us move towards this sufficient world. And to talk to you more about this, I'm really happy to welcome on stage Magali Payen, who is the founder of Imagine 2050 and also the co-founder of Newtopia, and also Cyril Dion, the Lille Dialogues ambassador, who is also a poet, a writer, a director, and the co-founder of Newtopia. So Magali and Cyril, welcome, and tell us more on these superpowers.
Hello. First of all, I'm really honored that Imagine 2050 is a partner of this really special day which is mentored by Cyril Dion. And it gives me hope to see that such a major festival tackles this topic with ambition, and this is only the beginning. So, why we must win the battle of narratives? 1 century ago, the politician Antonio Gramsci said that if we want to win the political battle, we first need to win the cultural battle. At that time, Antonio Gramsci was a political voice against Benito Mussolini and fascism, whereas today his idea and his theory of cultural hegemony are mainly picked up and implemented by the far-right parties. So Gramsci must be spinning in his grave. But let's go back to series. The battle of narratives, it echoes our motto at Newtopia, which is that to create a new world, we first need to imagine it. So, what we do with Newtopia is that we support artists that want to embody this new world. And for that, we create interaction between these artists and activists, whistleblowers, scientists, experts, and we do that through residencies, excursions, dinners, and so on. If you are here today at Series Mania, that means that you have the power to move and to inspire millions of people, on the opposite of the scientists. Emma talked about the IPCC report that was released 3 days ago in the most utter silence. Scientists are desperate. It's been years that they've been shouting in the desert, talking about the emergency to change as deep and as quickly as possible our way of living, our economy, our society. Some of them even launched scientist rebellion on the model of extinction rebellion, and they are asking for civil disobedience. They are asking for us to change our way of living and our way of making society, and you have the power to make this happen, actually. As writers, as broadcasters, as channels, as producers, you have the power to make this way of life sexy. You have the power to make sufficiency sexy. You have the power to show what the world could look like at its best, integrating the planet boundaries, the planetary, and integrating also the changes we will need to do to adapt to, because we will need to adapt climate change in any case. Displaying a low-carbon economy is a beginning. Another way would be to track all the negative clichés about eco-friendly people. And apart from inspiring through the main story, it's also possible to inspire through the behaviors of the characters, through the background of the story. It's also possible to display the benefits of such a society, such as health benefits, creation of jobs, much more happiness. And there is also a tool which is called the Planet Test. I don't know if you know it. It's like actually the Bechdel test, but for the planet. And what we need really are cultural pieces and fiction that show what this realistic future could look like at its best. But today, we mostly face dystopias. I don't know you, but I would never want to live in a future occurring in the series we can see at the moment. In this series, not only catastrophes happen, but also there is no chance to escape. In Don't Look Up, we don't have any chance to escape the meteorite. Our luck right now is that we are this meteorite and we can change ourselves. It is crucial that we manage our fears, that we manage our eco-anxiety, so that it doesn't take all the place in the creation process and the storytelling about the futures. It's important to show that we can adapt these changes in a spirit of solidarity, in a spirit of humanity. It's important to show values such as respect of life, respect of nature, And if we show all of that, we will be more prepared to choose how we want to act and the world we want to build. And we will not freeze in front of the most pessimistic pronostics, such as destruction of nature, war, pandemics, fascism, mafias, patriarchy, zombies. I'm joking about this one. Edouard Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, set the basis of the contemporary marketing in the 30s, and he succeeded in propagating all around the world an American way of life. So today, why not spark a desire for an ecological way of life? Whether you are a writer, a director, an actor, you can join the Newtopia movement. For that, it's really simple. You can go on the website newtopiastories.com and answer the survey. Altogether, if we join forces, we can make this new world happen. There is still hope, and for that we need you. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. How are you? Not too tired? I heard you had a big party last night? Yeah, so you want to go back to sleep? No, not yet. All right. Who doesn't speak French at all here? Nobody? Like 3 people? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to speak English anyway. I'm sorry, I'm going to read a part of what I'm going to say. I've been asked to tell you about my huge passion for stories and the way stories could shape the world. And so I would like to have an historical point of view about the way we human beings are using stories since, decades and centuries. To me, we human beings are storytellers. We started on doing that a long time ago, painting the walls of our caves with stories of huntings and gods. We actually tell stories to share with each other our subjectivity about the world. To George Marshall, these stories have a fundamental cognitive function. They are the means by which the emotional brain makes sense of the information gathered by the rational brain. And yes, it is through stories that we human beings make sense of our world. We learn value, shape our beliefs, and give form to our thoughts, dreams, hopes, and fears. Stories are everywhere. Myth, fables, epics, historical narratives, tragedies, comedies, paintings, dances, stained glass windows, movies, social stories, fairy tales, novels, scientific diagrams, comic books, conversations, and newspaper articles. Even before we learn to read and write, we hear more than 300 stories. And when these stories are shared by a sufficient number of people, they create new representations, new ways to organize ourselves, new rules, new laws, new social, political, or economic systems. The whole of our individual and collective constructions is a succession of fictions, of beliefs, which evolved with the wire of the centuries and shaped our perception of the world. Therefore, throughout history, some major narratives have shaped our world. Religious stories, war stories, slavery stories, monarchy stories, and fortunately, love stories. Each time, these stories were carried by powerful organizations, religious, political, military, and conveyed by media. First, storytellers, frescoes and paintings, then books and plays, and then, recently, films, series, advertisements, internet videos. Within the 20th century, one could say that three major narratives clashed, ideologically and militarily: fascism, communism, and capitalism. These three narratives were carried by regimes that each used cinema to widely share their vision of the world. Between 1933 and 1945, 1,200 feature films were made by the Nazi regime, ranging from sentimental comedies to historical frescoes. In 1943 alone, German cinemas recorded more than 1 billion admissions, 8 times more than today. For Stalin, the cinema is the most effective tool for the agitation of the masses. Our only problem is to know how to hold this tool well in hand. Great, isn't it? In 1947, Eric Johnson, president of the American Chamber of Commerce and the Motion Picture Association of America, was sent to France to negotiate the terms of the Marshall Plan. In exchange for the billions allocated to reconstruction, he imposed the right to 60% of the broadcasting rights on European screens. In this way, he hoped to introduce American culture: Coke, jeans, supermarkets, cars, suburban houses, consumerist frenzy, and the American dream. He declared before the Commission on Anti-American Activities, "American cinema is and must always be a weapon in the fight against communism." And it worked. Luckily for us, capitalism won, and the Americans have massively spread the idea of the American way of life all over the world through cinema, television, and advertising. But today, this story sets a new problem for us. We have reached a limit. We cannot produce and consume endlessly, constantly raising forests, emptying the oceans, saturating the atmosphere with carbon dioxide from burning oil and coal without changing the climate and degrading the living condition of our planet. We need a new story. I would even say a bunch of new stories. We need to imagine a new world, an ecological way of life, and to spread that idea. From the way we dress, move, house, and feed ourselves, to the way we organize our democracies and economic systems, everything needs to be rethought, reinvented, and rebuilt. It might sound trivial to artists, but how can we bring this new world into being if we are not first able to imagine it? To do that, storytellers have a huge role to play, especially the ones who reach the most people. Today, series have this power. It is not a question of making bad films with a thesis, but of seizing dramatic material of infinite richness, of approaching one of the most crucial issues of the present through the prism of our sensibilities. To bring the possible to the real, according to Alain Damasio's formula. Would we have gone to the moon if Jules Verne had not first imagined it? Would we have built flying cars, because we did, if we hadn't seen them in so many movies? As Professor Jean-Gabriel Ganassia, a specialist in artificial intelligence, observes, for many years, science fiction was inspired by science to imagine scenarios. Today, we have a kind of inversion. It is science that is inspired by science fiction. Just as sex education or euphoria shook up our representations of sexuality and gender, just as seeing a black president in 24 may have helped to elect the first black president in the United States, we can develop narratives that help us imagine a just and sustainable future. Through the series, we can inspire other ways of being in the world, of connecting and addressing the challenges that lies ahead. And we need it now. Thank you.